All right, it is time to ruffle some feathers again. Uh, let's crack down on some questions that will either make you rethink Jeet Kune Do or it'll make you double down on your favorite argument. Right? Either way, you've been warned. Hello, everyone. This is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Do Rebel. Welcome to the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues, episode number 329. This is our faithful Ask Me Anything with yours truly. As you're logging in, if you'd be kind enough to say where you're logging in from, hit the like button and feel free to continue doing so throughout the dialogue. If you are catching the simulcast over on the YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and hit notification bell as well. But of course, the best thing you can do is to share this video and spread the word about the Jeet Kune Do Dialogues. Okay, so let me just take a couple minutes and make sure that we are streaming live to both the YouTube and Facebook. Okay, so Bucky's here. All right, so I know that YouTube is up and running. I don't see a Terry Valor or anybody on Facebook, so let me push a button and refresh the feed and see what I see, and then we'll get cracking. Okay, all right, Facebook looks good too. Okay, there's Terry Valor. All right. Okay, you're only 2 minutes late, Terry. That's all right. That's forgivable. Okay, so I had done the um, the postcard and put certain questions on there, and I think Eric Carr, who's a Jeet Kune Do instructor in California, I think he did a really good job of essentially answering the questions that I had put on the postcard, right? So what I thought I would do, if we have time, I'll do those at the end. But like I said, Eric did a really good job of answering them up front. So I'm gonna go instead with the questions that came in um, after the postcard was put up, right? And these are not necessarily in any order. It's just where I made my notes on them. But okay, so we'll start with the easiest one, right? Actually, no, it's not as easy as I thought because I gotta find something and put that image up, and then so give me a second um, while this thing tries to load. Okay, so in the meantime, let's see who's here. So Bucky's over on the YouTube. Cesar's here. Ronnie Reagan's here. Terry, Dennis Lastly, and Doug Melchert. Okay, cool. All right. Oh man, come on. Okay, there we go. So where is it? That's it. That's one. Okay, so as soon as this thing loads, I'll show it to you because the question was. Let me just find it here in the list. The question came from Joseph Flores, and he asked if Bruce Lee had studied any Penjak Silat. So, to the best of my knowledge, my understanding is that because there. Okay, so here's the thing, right? So there's a rumor about Bruce Lee and William Reeders, I think it is the guy's name. So there's this rumor that I've seen in a couple of different places that they met and that Bruce Lee, everybody talks about Bruce Lee training under somebody, right? What does that mean to train under somebody? I mean, if you met somebody once and you had a conversation and maybe that conversation led to something a little bit physical, that's not training under someone. That's not even training with someone. That's just spending some time, right? So there's this story that is what happened with Bruce Lee and William Reeders. But my only evidence, right, of Bruce Lee having some understanding of Silat is this. So this is the Quentin Chambers. Quentin Chambers. Is it Quentin Chambers? I think it's Quentin Chambers. Um, Don Drager, and I forget the other guy's name, right? But this is the Penjak Silat book. And so the part that I'm trying to draw attention to here is that in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, there's a page in the grappling section. And so if you look at these, let me see if I can change this display a little bit. Okay, there we go. All right, much better, Dwight. So if you look at the illustrations in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, to me, they look like they're copies, they're traces or copies from the Howard Alexander, Quentin Chambers, and Don Drager book. So that to me is enough evidence that Bruce Lee was aware of the Indonesian fighting art known as Penjak Silat. But as far as him training in it, nah, I can't say for sure that he did. Okay, right? But I'll tell you this: Sifu Dan will sometimes say that the reason he got into box says, for example, the reason he got into Muay Thai, the reason he got into Penjak Silat, all these things were because of Bruce Lee, because um, he and Bruce Lee might have had a conversation about them. They might have a discussion about him. Bruce Lee might have shown him something, or what have you, right? So that's it for that Penjak Silat question. But I'm sure that rumor will float around for a very, very long time, right? Okay, all right. So I was going through the list of names again, and I saw that Cesar was here, and I saw that Bucky started asking questions. So Bucky's questions are the most esoteric stuff that it's not easy to answer off the cuff. Fortunately, I will see him tomorrow morning, so anything that I don't answer here, right? Um, I can have in discussion with him tomorrow. So Bucky says, "How difficult is it to use no way as way and no limitation as limitation for the average person?" Well, what's his name? George Winstable accused me of being an elitist, a Jeet Kune Do elitist the other day, right? So if it's an average person, Bucky, there's no way that they're going to understand a concept such as no way is way and no limitation is limitation at the outset. They got to spend some time working with the physical material, but also working with the mental and philosophical aspects of Jeet Kune Do before. So there's no way that anybody fresh off the boat, so to speak, right? Somebody who has zero martial art training, zero forehand knowledge about Bruce Lee and Bruce Lee's philosophy and what have you, that they're going to be able to do that. No, people have to spend time in. Burton Richardson said it this way one time. They have to spend time in a fixed way up to a point, right? It's like people say, spending some time in prison is a really great way to appreciate the freedom that you have if you're not in prison, right? So it's like that. People have to spend some time in something fixed, in something limited, in order to grasp the idea. I suspect that even in Bruce Lee's time, that some of the people who trained with him struggled with this idea of absolute freedom, especially if they came from a more classical or a more traditional martial art background. Here's this little renegade kid saying, "No, no, 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 no. You can just go with the flow. You can just do this. You don't have to be limited to that structure, this structure, whatever." I suspect that even in the beginning, for some of those guys, it might have been a little bit because it was different. So it might have been a little bit difficult to deal with that, right? So okay, so like I said, Cesar's here. So Cesar, um, but I don't have I can't put it up because I don't have it here. Anyhow, well, okay. I'll just read what he wrote. He said, if studying other martial arts is not a rule in Jeet Kune Do, if hypothetically you only exclusively trained in the JKD that Bruce Lee taught in Asano and nothing else, how would your training be different, and what would you do differently from what you don't do now? So essentially, if I'll do it personally, if I had only trained in the version of JKD that Bruce Lee taught in Asano, so that would have been between consistently that would have been between 67 and what 70 or something, right? And you never explore anything else. So there's no Filipino Eskrima, there's no Penjak Silat, there's no Muay Thai, there's no Savat, none of that stuff. Then yes, my training today would look very different from what it does. Because for starters, I'd be working from a much smaller toolbox, so to speak. All right. Technically, what's the word? Technically tight. That's an industry term. Technically tight because Bruce Lee's stuff was tight, but it would be limited because that era of JKD was heavily influenced, even though not towards the end. But there was a Wing Chun mechanical influence. There was the Western boxing. There was the fencing. So all the tools were there. The lead hand, the stop hit, that type of stuff. But there was still a lot that Bruce Lee was figuring out. So he was in the refining stage. He was not at the final draft of what he was doing. So if I had stayed in that snapshot, then I'd be doing, the footwork, um, maybe even sticking to the trap in hand stuff, even though, like I said, towards the end, it appears that he wasn't that deeply into the Wing Chun structure, right? But there's no way that I would have been doing Thai boxing, for example, right? There's no way that I would be integrating weaponry, right? And I'm trying to think what else, because in the training in the box française and what have you, like the kicks went up above the low line, right? We had the kicks to the high line and kicks to the middle line and kicks to the low line and what have you. So I think if we'd not done that, there probably never would have been any high kicking or whatever, right? Might not have as good an understanding of the Muay Thai, right? Of the clinch or the knee and the elbow. The the grappling might not have been at as sophisticated a level as it is today, right? So the way that I train and teach now is driven by the spirit of Jeet Kune Do. It's not driven by the preservation of some kind of fixed curriculum. What some people call Jun Fan Gung Fu or what have you. So I follow Bruce Lee's trajectory, not his footprint in the sand. I have trained in other arts, not because, well, the major reason I train in other arts is because that's what Dan Nansana was doing. So I followed him in that. But it wasn't with a thought that you had to complete Jeet Kune Do, because it's the pursuit of the Jeet Kune Do model that sends you looking in other places. So the JKD that Bruce Lee taught Dan and Asano, that's what you could refer to as the spark. What people like me, what we do today is the fire that came from that spark. So yes, my training would definitely be different. Um, it'd be valuable, but it probably wouldn't be as complete as, no, not complete, as well rounded, right? It wouldn't be cross informed, since there was no cross training or style hopping, as my good friend Richard Torres would call it. So we'd be less cross informed, um, less personalized, because you'd be trying to stick to this idea. this pattern, right, that Bruce Lee had set up. So it might even not be as honest as it should be. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, right? Okay, so that's my take on that, Cesar. Okay, so let me go back to the board here. Um, Bucky says, "What does use in no way as way and limitation as limitation? What does it look like?" um, what does it look like, Bucky? Well, what's a good example? You know how when Bruce Lee talks about how it hits and I don't hit, it hits and what have you. But essentially, Bucky, it's when something comes your way and you deal with it. You don't stop to think, oh, um, am I in left lead or right lead? Oh, do I feel like this art or that art right now? Oh, no, you don't have time for any of that. Something happens. It's the whole adapt like a shadow, respond like an echo. So here's the idea of no way is way. I throw the ball to you and you catch it. You don't stop to think, oh, is it a cricket ball? Is it a baseball? Is it a basketball? Is it a football? Do I have to adjust the way I catch it? If it's a football with a tight spiral, I know that term. Do I have to catch it a particular way because it's a particular kind of ball coming at me? Or do I just catch the ball and not get hit in the face or whatever? That's what no way is way looks like. Training to be able to pull that off is no limitation as limitation. Okay. But we can delve deeper into this tomorrow, Bucky. All right. Off the board and back to the notes. So, my good friend Clara Melton, give me a sec. Clara said, do you think too much importance and too much credence is given to the Tao of Jeet Kune Do? Um, Especially since it was compiled from Bruce Lee's unorganized notes without any input from him whatsoever, and it was published after his death. So, is there too much importance and too much credence given to the Tao of Jeet Kune Do? Yes, by some people, not everybody. But I do think that there are people who place too much importance and, frankly, too much reverence on the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. And I say that as someone who's read it cover to cover, who has 5 versions of it, right? Okay, right? And 3 versions of Bruce Lee's fighting method. So I say it as somebody who has quoted it, who has respected it and still respects it, but also as someone who knows the context in which it came together. Okay, so it was what do you call it? A publishing breakthrough and a publishing coup for Mito Uehara and Ohara Publications to hire an editor to go through some some of the notes that Linda Lee made available and turn that into a book, right? So the problem is when people hold up that book as if it's scripture, when they treat it like a, a how-to manual rather than a notebook, right? So, you have people who like to quote the Tao without understanding that Bruce Lee didn't sign off on that, right? Bruce Lee, he didn't sign off with the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. Like, okay, this stuff in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, this is my Jeet Kune Do. Because he wasn't done. He didn't edit it. Um, he didn't even get to decide what went into the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. So, am I saying that it's useless? No, of course not. It's an incredible resource if you understand what you're looking at. If you if you if you view it as a source for the depth of Bruce Lee's thinking, um, for the depth of his thinking, and then for the breadth of his study, right? But if you're looking at it as the be all end all of Jeet Kune Do, then you're freezing the guy's process in time and what's this and mistaken the menu for the meal. That's the term, right? So if you treat it like it's the Bible of Jeet Kune Do, stop doing that, right? It is it's a posthumous journal of a guy who was still asking questions, a guy who was still evolving, a guy who was still, to use the common vernacular, he was still doing the work, right? And if you're not doing the same, if you're not asking questions, if you're not evolving, if you're not doing the work, right, then you're not doing Jeet Kune Do. You're treating it like if it was. So this is a joke I came up with. You're treating it like if it's Jeet Kune done. You get it? Jeet Kune done, right? Anyhow, okay. I cracked myself up. I wish I had an audience that could tell me if that was funny or not. Right? Let's see. Back to the board here. Okay, Frank. What's happening, Frankie? Um, so Frank says, a teenager asked me how I would defend myself from a knife attack like the one perpetrated on Austin Metcalf in Frisco, Texas. I told him that when someone challenges me to hit them, I don't hit them. That's pretty smart, Frankie boy. That's smart. Um, I mean, you just don't. You just. What does Burt Richardson say all the time? Right? Always expect a weapon. Okay. And so if somebody says to you, "Well, yeah, touch me and see what you get," and I mean, not being there, I don't know how much time there was between when um, Carmelo Anthony went into his backpack and came out with the blade or what have you. I have no idea, right? But situations like that, close quarter stuff, because it was raining and they were under a tent or something, that's not a good idea to assume anything about anybody like that. So I agree with that. If somebody challenges me to hit them, I don't hit them. I agree with you 100%, Frank. Right. Magazine Retriever says, I've heard of elderly retired Thai boxers who destroyed the nerve sensitivity in their hands to the point where they cannot pick up a penny with two fingers. Have you heard of this? Not particularly with Thai boxers, but it sounds familiar with like regular boxers, right, who have messed up their hands. Um, I'm wondering about Thai boxers and destroying the nerves like in their legs or what have you. But when so I can't say that I've definitely heard it about Thai boxers, but the story of boxers whose hands are all messed up in later years, I've heard of, and I've definitely heard of um, Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys who take 30 minutes to get out of bed in their later years, right? So there's definitely something to doing what you can to maintain that youth and vitality, right? Even as a martial artist. Okay. All right. Back to the notes. So Ken Fleming said, I'm interested in what Bruce Lee would have done with weapons. So he didn't really ask me a question. He didn't really ask me what I thought, right? But I think Ken will be okay with me answering an unasked question. And my suspicion is that Bruce Lee would have continued to use classical and or traditional martial art weapons in his films. But Bruce Lee does not strike me as somebody who would have undergone a deep study of something like Eskrima. I think that Bruce Lee was too modern for that. And I'm sure we've all heard the stories about that Bruce Lee carried, right? A handgun. So I just think that when it comes to the weapons aspect of martial arts, yeah, he'd weave it into his movies, but I don't think for himself that he would be enduring a rigorous study of, you know, stick and dagger, right? Or anything like that. Bruce Lee was way too cool for that kind of old school stuff, right? Okay. Let's see what else. Who else is on here? Is that CLRG? Yeah, CLRG is gonna kill me if I don't get his videos to him, right? And then I'm supposed to upload some curriculum stuff for him. The thing is, I haven't told this to him, so now I'll tell it. I'll say it to him publicly here. I'll send you the curriculum stuff, Carlos, but be aware that there's a certain percentage on that curriculum stuff that I will send you that I probably don't do anymore, or if I still do it, I do it differently. Just so you know, okay. But that's why I got to come out to Prescott again and show you, the variations of what have you. All right, okay. So, what did Mick? What is this thing about leftist tears? I have no idea what you're talking about. All right. Okay. So, um, Blair McKay says that I talk too much shite. Oh, okay. Well, good. Then I hope you're not still here listening. Right? Um, I think that's a good one, Nick. Right? Okay. So now back to the notes. Did I? Yeah, I talked about my good friend Paul Johnson. Okay. No, wait. I'm gonna leave Paul's. Now you know what? Let's do it now, right? And then that way we can wrap up. We can wrap up early, right? Okay. So Paul Johnson says, how about the differences between concept JKD and Bruce Lee's JKD? Not the politics of it, but the technique, right? Okay. So this is a little bit related to stuff that we talked about before. Okay. But let's do this. Let's put the politics aside, right? Because honestly, that is where a lot of people get lost, right? And so we'll put that aside and we'll talk technique, right? So, like I said earlier, Bruce Lee's 1960s Jeet Kune Do was pretty tight and streamlined, and you know what I mean when I say pretty tight, right? It had a very strong core structure, the fighting position, the mobility, the explosiveness because of the fencing influence, right? And strong side forward, that type of thing. The striking, the hands were heavily boxing based, right? Straight lead, stop hit, that type of thing. The kicking was predominantly low line, right? And lead leg stuff. Um, Probably heavier on the hook kick and the side kick than it would be on like the shin kick from Muay Thai or what have you, right? That type of stuff. The trapping hands was present, but as everybody knows, towards the end, maybe there wasn't that much of an emphasis on it, right? Maybe towards the end, the trapping was used economically to like break through defenses, right? Not to show off like fancy hand fighting or what have you. The grappling was not of a very high level. Um, Bruce Lee obviously knew some counter grappling, like I like to call it, because I think he exposes that or highlights that or demonstrates that very competently in the fight scene with um, Jihan Jae in Game of Death. Right, Bruce Lee definitely could find his way on the mat for sure. Okay, but I don't think he was rolling on the mat like Mick Tully every week. Okay, um, weaponry basically none in Bruce Lee's JKD. He might have understood weapons through fencing principles, but Bruce Lee's JKD at that time didn't have any integrated weapons training. So, in other words, Bruce Lee stuff, direct, simple, economical, um, based on interception, rooted in personal combat, not rooted in art for art's sake. JKD Concepts, on the other hand, right, as it evolved um, through Sifudan and others, it added a much broader technical base. So the kicking range, and I know Richard Torres, it's not the kicking range, it's long, middle, and close quarter, right? But the kicking skill, the skill of kicking, all right? That was expanded with influence from the aforementioned boxe française, Muay Thai, that type of thing. So now the kicks are higher. Um, the side kick is not, well. The side kick's still prevalent, but because there's a sidekick in boxe française. There's no sidekick. Well, they're not. They're used to not be a sidekick, but now there's a side foot jab. I've heard in Muay Thai, right? So in concepts JKD, that technical base for kicking would have been expanded. Um, Boxing combinations became a thing, especially with the creation of the different series and what have you. And it would have become a thing because of the influence of boxe française and Muay Thai. And then even, the Panantukan stuff that started to come into the blend, right? The trap in hands, okay? Now, the trap in hands, as my friend Bob Landers has pointed out, the trap in hands was the thing that distinguished JKD in the years of like the seminar circuit stuff, right? So in the 80s and 90s and what have you. And with more study in some circles of Wing Chun and looking at the Filipino handwork and what have you, the trapping became more sophisticated for sure, became more fanciful, right? And there came an emphasis on stuff like flow drills and that type of thing, right? So again, an aspect of combat, technical base expanded, grappling expanded, jiu-jitsu, Penjak Silat. I mean, people even started to hear about this thing called Dumog, right? Um, we were introduced to shoot wrestling, right, through Yuri Nakamura. So again, technical base expanded. Weapons training, need I say more? So, strictly technically speaking, Bruce Lee was kind of a minimalist, right? Bruce Lee was linear. Jeet Kune Do Concepts is broader, multi-ranged, and when not handled correctly, leans a little more toward collection than it does towards reduction when not handled correctly. So here's the thing, there's no right for me, there's no right or wrong approach if you understand the purpose. If the Jeet Kune Do goal, Bruce Lee's goal, is efficiency, right? Hacking away at the unessentials, cutting away the unnecessary, right? Okay. The goal or a goal of Jeet Kune Do concept is adaptability across all ranges and circumstances. So JKD Concepts takes a broader approach. So you go into it, and in there, you find the stuff that you hack away at. But if you start with Bruce Lee's stuff, there is nothing to hack away. There is nothing for you to get rid of through your personal experience, because then you'll end up with this. But if you start with this, yeah, now you can have that personalized experience of hacking stuff down and coming up with your what works for you. So there's no right or wrong the way I look at it. Feel free to disagree. The risk, like I said earlier, with concepts is that if you're not careful, then you're accumulating and you're adding stuff and you're not stripping away anything. And when that happens, then you lose the purity of what Bruce Lee was really after, right? Which is kind of like maximum effect with minimum movement, and you lose that. So that's the question I would say that people like me, who are in a Sano influence, got to be asking ourselves all the time. Are we collecting techniques, or are we refining the tools through the cross training approach? Because Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do is about the latter. It is about refining the tools. Okay. All right. So after that long diatribe, let's see if anybody came back into. So this, okay, so Scorch, I guess you weren't here when I said this is exactly what I was talking about, right? Herniated disc from rolling around too long on the mat. Yep, I have definitely heard about those injuries in BJJ, Scorch. Um, Maybe they need yoga in their life, but that's why, what's his name? I think it's Hajar Machado is like a yoga jujitsu guy or something, right? But yeah, for sure. Okay. Um, Bucky, what is this? What is the definition of the word politics? In what's the context, Bucky? Right? The word politics. You know what? I don't think I've ever looked up the definition of the word politics. I don't even know the root of it, Bucky. Uh, but let's see. Um, Bucky, we'll have to deal with this tomorrow, right? I'm gonna take a look at this. I can just tell you that Jeet Kune Do politics essentially centers around who is doing it right, which Jeet Kune Do political party is doing it right, got it right from Bruce Lee, and is passing it on the right way. I think politics is usually um, has something to do with the governing of the people, but I'm not sure. Okay, so we'll we'll deal with that tomorrow, Bucky, when I see you. All right. Paul McGovern says that for a system based on simplicity and economy, people sure know how to complicate things. Yeah, yeah, we do for sure. Right. Um, okay. Cesar says, what do you think of Joe Lewis's application of JKD? When, in the opinion of many, he is the only one who tested the real efficiency of JKD fighting and competing. Okay, well, so there's a conundrum or a disconnect there, because Jeet Kune Do was not set up for competition. So when you say that Joe Lewis is the only one who tested Jeet Kune Do's efficiency in competition, see that's a clash of terms. Okay, now I am not saying that Joe Louis didn't do an excellent job of applying things like five ways of attack or what have you in competition, because that's what we know. We know that something like the five ways of attack belongs in competition. There's no two ways about it. So I would agree that Joe Louis did a great job of applying that aspect, right? But that is a particular aspect of Jeet Kune Do. That is not, excuse me, that is not the Jeet Kune Do. That is not the Jeet Kune Do total picture that he applied. No, his confine was to sport kickboxing, right? To martial sport, as my good friend Michael Brown said to me earlier today. Not martial art, but martial sport. But did he do an excellent job? Yeah. From everything that I've ever heard, he was definitely the guy for that. But his expression of Jeet Kune Do is not that's not the complete picture of Jeet Kune Do. No, right? Del Mountain says that Eddie Bravo says he won't accept. You know, when I was thinking about when I mentioned the jujitsu people with the herniated disc, like Storm said, like Scort said, um, I was thinking about Eddie Bravo in the back of my mind, right, and the rubber guard and all that stuff. I'm wondering if Eddie Bravo's people have that kind of affliction or not. And now Del says that Eddie Bravo says he won't accept a new student who doesn't have the flexibility to sit in a full lotus. So he wouldn't accept Dell and he wouldn't accept me either because I can't do that anymore. Right. Um, okay. So Joe Jacobs, what's happening? Right. Okay. So Joe wants to know, do you think JKD can actually flow between arts seamlessly? Okay. So this is the thing about that, Joe. Um, Now this is the Dwight Woods take on this, okay? So this is not gospel. This is the Dwight Woods take on this. The reason that that whole idea of flowing from art to art came about is because of Sifu Dan's propensity to name stuff. So if you've ever seen Richard Torres and me going back and forth, right? About the JKD blend, because on a particular video, Inosano shows, well, here's my entry, a kick from Savat. Here's my follow up, a punch from boxing. Here's my continued follow up because the punch wasn't successful. So we were at midpoint. So here's a trap from Wing Chun. And here's this, and here now is a shoulder lock from jujitsu. So he showed a technical sequence and named like four or more arts. So that idea of flowing from art to art, that's where that came about. But here's how simple it is to remedy that. Don't name them. Kick, punch, trap, grapple, and you're done. But now, if you name it and you're supposed to be teaching or highlighting or demonstrating Jeet Kune Do, and now you name it, people are like, well, are you saying that those four things that you just named, that's what makes up Jeet Kune Do? And Inosano went so far as to call it the Jeet Kune Do blend. So that's what gives my friend Richard ammunition to say that Inosano changed Jeet Kune Do. And I've tried to explain to him, no, Inosano was doing the courteous thing of giving credit where it's due. But the bigger message was to show people that arts that came from different parts of the world could work together. But that type of thing is what happened in the JKD Concepts approach, that it backfired seriously. Okay. So it's not arts that flow seamlessly together. Okay. Can I flow from punching into grappling? Yeah. Can I flow? Can you be in grappling, right? And let's say you reverse the mount and end up in the guard and then pass the guard and get back up. So now you go from grappling to standing up. So now maybe you can kick. All these things can be done seamlessly. So the idea, Joe, is the training sequences that you create are to achieve that ability. Okay. And there's a formula for it, right? I'll tell you about it next time I see you. There's a formula for it. And what that formula does is it introduces you to the fact that when done for real, this seamless flowing, it ain't pretty. See? But if you're demonstrating or highlighting or trying to, if you're demonstrating or highlighting the art, then yeah, you try to make it look as cool as possible. And that can start to become, like we were just talking about in JKD Concepts, when people um, miss the forest for the trees and start accumulating, when it's not about that at all. So when you get a lot of fancy, prolonged technical sequences and what have you, just to illustrate the fact that an art from this part of the world can fit in with an art from this other part of the world. If that gets too complicated and what have you, yeah, then you don't make the point. You don't make the important point, which is, yeah, things work together. Kicking and punching and trapping and grappling, those things definitely work together, and they've always worked together. We just messed it up, and by we I mean uh, JKD Concepts people. We messed it up by naming everything and giving people ammunition to say, oh, well, then you're saying that these arts make up Jeet Kune Do or what have you, right? So just don't name it and you'd be fine, right? Okay. I'm not sure what this is. Ricard said, probably the best explanation I've heard about the different approaches in 27 years. Okay, I hope that was me, Ricard, and not something that you read. So if it's me, thank you very much, my friend. Right? Billy Brown says you got to have a lot of rocks before you can start the hacking away. Yeah, you got to have a big stone. You got to have a big stone, right? And then you need more rock as you age. Yeah, so you can throw it at your enemies, right? And that's something we never saw Bruce Lee do. So so you can continue hacking away as you age. Yeah, yeah. Look, Billy, I think is one of the most adamant at making the point that we never saw Bruce Lee age, and that at age 32, hardly likely that he had everything figured out. I mean, I'm wicked smart, I would say, right? But at age 32, let's see, what year was that? Oh man, I didn't have it together. I did not, right? Okay, so yeah, love Bruce Lee to death, but don't turn him into a god, right? Mick Tully says politics and JKD. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, only get involved, it seems. Um, as for JKD and competition, Rafael Lovato was Bellator light heavyweight world champion and multiple BJJ world champion too. Um, Now I know who Rafael Lovato is because I met him or senior or somebody that had something to do with them. I met them at a marketing conference, but I was not aware that they had that Lovato had a JKD background. Mick, I didn't know that. Okay, cool. Right. Okay. Again, excuse me. In the ongoing discussion of what Bruce Lee would have done had he not died in 1973, I believe that he would have focused more on acting than on martial arts, particularly after the success of Enter the Dragon. Do you agree with that? Frank, I don't know, right? Because in the world of hypotheticals, the world of what ifs when it comes to Bruce Lee, I say that we should base our beliefs or opinions on what did happen, since that's an indication of what might have happened. So that's what you're doing. You say, well, if you end up with an extremely successful film, why would you drop out of film and go back to martial art, right? So yeah, I get that. But who's to say he wouldn't have done both? When Chuck Norris started, when Chuck Norris's film and TV career took off, did he divorce himself 100% from owning schools or running schools or teaching or training? I don't think he did. Now, he might not have been there as often as he was before, so something like that could have happened with Bruce Lee. But I don't see Bruce Lee now having the financial wherewithal to sophisticate, it's a word, not a verb, but I'll use it, to sophisticate his martial art stuff. I can't think of a reason why he wouldn't do that. Bruce Lee paid Dan Inosanto to teach part-time at the Los Angeles school. What if Bruce Lee, because he was making a ton of money now, he was like, okay, we're going to open up or reopen the Los Angeles school. We're going to reopen Oakland, and I'm going to ask Taki what he needs and if he wants to beef up what his operation. That's possible too, right? So Bruce Lee would still be contributing to the world to his world of Jeet Kune Do and still be doing movies. So I don't think that he would have gone in one direction and have forsaken the other direction, Frank. Right? Billy Brown says, I learned my hubud from JKD legend RT. Right? Okay. Mick, but what if you're afraid to grapple? Like, oh, Mick, come on. They're not afraid to grapple because Torres, remember, um, I think Torres trained in jujitsu, albeit Japanese jujitsu, with his dad before he got into to JKD. So I'm pretty sure that in at his school they do their kind of grappling, right? I'm pretty sure they don't put on the gi and pull out the mats and take their shoes off and roll around the way you might, Mick. But I'm pretty sure they don't ignore grappling 100%. But they might be afraid to roll with you, yes, right? Because they don't want to start any rumors about orientation. So, but I don't think that they ignore grappling 100%. But they probably don't. They probably don't do it out of a jujitsu format, right? Uh, Okay, I'm not gonna talk about flow drills, what have you. Um, Bucky, I just explained what integration is versus collection. So here's my here's my collection, right, of headsets. Okay, right. Um, here's my here. I could here's part of a collection of books and magazines, right? There's no integration there. These are all separate pieces and what have you, right? Now, integration would be, let's say I knew how to repair headsets. And so something goes wrong with the Sony. So I know how to go looking in the Behringer to find a part that I could put into the Sony. Now I'm integrated, you see, because I'm using something from somewhere else and blending it in with something else. But by themselves, that's a collection. That's not integration. So hopefully that makes sense. But Bucky, I'm always willing to follow up with you when we see each other, right? Okay, Cesar says, I need new glasses. You've talked about the incorporation of high kicks in JKD, but is it really necessary? There are many famous high kickers who today have metal hips and knees. Well, yeah, they have metal hips and knees because they overdid the kicking, right? Is there a lesson there about the way to kick? Yeah, because if you overdo the kicking and you overdo like not all, one, two, three, four of the six Taekwondo black belts that I'm friends with, four of the six have new knees. Five of the seven, I just remembered one more guy, right? Five of the seven have titanium knees or something, right? My my one time mentor, um, Tom Callis, he's had the hip operation stuff, but I think Tom had like a 2-for-1 because he went from years and years of Taekwondo to then years of BJJ. So he definitely had to have that work done on him, right? So the incorporation of high kicks again. When I was kicking high, it was a way of maintaining flexibility. And to paraphrase what Salem Ashley would say, right? If you can kick high, if you can kick high with good balance, good power, good accuracy, talk to Billy Brown, somebody like Billy Brown. If you can do that, you know how easy it is to kick the low line and the middle line with good balance and accuracy and power. So that's a reason to train high kicking. Just for that. If Look, man, if you could pull off a heel cho and jump, or a, a chong li, and jump in the air and spin, right, and kick the crap out of somebody, right, a jump spinning sidekick or whatever, how easy is it for you, right, to kick somebody in the knee or the groin? Yeah. So that to me is a benefit of training the high kick. Doesn't have anything to do for me with functional martial art. But if you watch the whatever channels it is that you can go to see like real life fights and what have you, every once in a while you see somebody throw a high kick and hit somebody in the head and put them out. So anything can happen. Well, not anything can happen, but I mean, yeah, there's somebody out there who's real good at kicking people in the head on the street. So, but people who, if I run a school and I run a school that's heavy on kicking and every day, right, or 6 days a week, that's what I'm doing. I'm literally kicking up a storm. At some point, yeah, I might have some problems with the hips and the knees and what have you because I overdid it, right? So yeah, so that's what would happen. So high kicking, good for endurance and flexibility and coordination to a certain degree and what have you, right? But functionally, for me, not anymore. All right. Let me just go back to the notes and make sure that I did cover. Yeah, Ken. Hang on. Yeah. Okay. So I did cover everything that came in after the fact, right? No, I didn't. Okay. So this will be. We're coming up on the last one, right? So Anthony Quintiliani asked, was original JKD meant to stay the same even into future times? Now that's interesting, right? Because it's something that we've talked about before, right? Um, but it's for some reason, right? For some reason, when he sent me this question, I thought, I don't think I've ever been asked this before. Well, so now I'm twisted as to what made it different. Anyhow, right? So no, original JKD was is not meant to stay the same either. But see, I can't really answer from the original JKD standpoint, right? Look, here's the thing: Bruce Lee was about process, right? Bruce Lee, look, this is one of my least favorite phrases in the world of Jeet Kune Do: preserving Bruce Lee's art. What the heck does that mean? Bruce Lee, I got another joke for you. Okay? Here's why preserving Bruce Lee's art is ridiculous. The guy said, be like water. Okay? He didn't say, I should have a graphic. He didn't say, be like ice. You get it? Be like water, fluid, flowing, not be like ice, frozen. No, I wish I had a laugh track that I could play. Okay. Okay. So no, not even. But the thing about it is that the purveyors of original Jeet Kune Do, the ones who are lost, will tell you that you know what they say, because I've seen the guys say Bruce Lee did all the heavy lifting. Bruce Lee did all the research and all the heavy lifting for us. So we don't have to progress in anything, right? But no, original JKD was never meant to stay the same, right? Bruce Lee didn't build JKD as a time capsule, right? Um, I don't think that his idea was, oh, I'm creating the perfect method and people will practice this the same way, you know, from now until eternity. I think that Inosanto correctly interpreted Bruce Lee's mindset as absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and add what is specifically your own. And yes, I know that that's not a Bruce Lee quote. That's why I said Inosanto correctly interpreted Bruce Lee's mindset as that. So this original JKD, the thing from 67 to 1970, that's where Bruce Lee was at the time. It's his best expression of his fighting knowledge up to that moment. That's what I would say. Okay. But his writings don't seem to match this idea that it's fixed. Okay. If it was supposed to stay exactly the same, then that would mean that Bruce Lee believed that he had reached some final absolute state. And yes, I know that he wrote letters where he talked about his style and his system. But because he used the word style, or system to refer to his art of Jeet Kune Do does not mean that he thought that he had the perfect system, complete, written out, and ready to be passed on unchangedly for generations to come. No, 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 right? Now, the flip side of that is that that doesn't mean then that you start throwing everything together and calling it Jeet Kune Do, because that's not the point. There are principles that have to be followed, right? But these are not static principles. These are living principles, right? Simplicity and directness and efficiency. Those are things that are living. So they're meant to be expressed by you through or according to your experience, according to your environment. So a guy who trains in Jeet Kune Do, who is a security officer or law enforcement, right, versus a guy who trains in JKD, who is a Wall Street guy, their experience of it is going to be different because they're going to run their Jeet Kune Do experience through different filters because of their environments. So that's the thing, man, and that's I think that's what's hard sometimes for people to grasp, right? So they don't want to do any independent thinking, so that's why they want to treat original JKD as like a sacred relic, right? It's something that it's passed down from generation to generation, and you dare not modify it, right? Because Bruce Lee did all the work. You're missing the message. It's water, not ice. Right? I cracked myself up. Okay. All right. So let's see. Let me go back here. So I think my friend Billy is disagreeing with me. Naming something and making it easy for students to understand make it wrong. Now, the naming, Billy, I don't think naming it doesn't make it easier to understand, right? My thing about the naming of it is what the end result became. That's the issue. The end result is what I'm talking about. I'm all for opening people's minds and having them, be able to go, oh wow, that's incredible. That I grew up in Barbados and we ate rice. And then I moved to Miami and I find out that the West Indians that I grew up with, the Bajans and the Trinidadians or what have you that I grew up with, who ate rice, the Cubans here in Miami eat rice too. And then there are no sushi restaurants in Barbados, right? There might be now, but there weren't when I was growing up. So then you go to the sushi restaurant and you find out what? They eat rice. And then you find out that the Thai people, they eat rice too. Well, this is incredible. So now your worldview is expanded, but then at the same time it contracts because you realize, oh, rice is a universal thing. That's why Inasano would name stuff so that people would get the idea. Oh man, look at this. Movement is universal. So that helps to shape the mind of the student in terms of being open minded and having an expanded point of view. I don't know that it necessarily or automatically makes it easier to understand. Okay. So Billy, it's not a right or wrong. What I'm talking about is it inadvertently, maybe this is your point of disagreement with me, because what I'm saying that it inadvertently gave, let's call them Inasano detractors, ammunition that they could use against him. And I'm sure, Billy, you're thinking, well, screw them, right? Okay. But and yeah, right. Privately, that's what I do. But publicly on the podcast, I'll go, yeah, it gave them ammunition that they could use against him. Right. So what's the other part you said? All the people complain are people that suck at most things. Billy, my brother, I love you to death. Right. Okay. But yeah. All right. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Okay. Is it reasonable? Okay, Bucky, I'm just gonna. Oh wait, let me go back to the notes because I realized I did have one more. Now this one threw me. This one threw me for a loop because I don't know Brenton Latour. I don't know him personally, so in answering his question, in reading his question, it's like, huh. I would need to know a little bit more in order to do it justice. But that's never stopped me from forging ahead, right? So Brenton says, my JKD journey has taken me into historic European martial arts, right? The sword fencing clubs and the tournaments with long sword and saber and that stuff. My introspection is telling me to learn Shaolin Kung Fu weapons forms to improve my sword fencing. However, I am conflicted with the JKD approach of rejecting forms. Since my martial art journey is focusing on the expression of historic weapons, would it still be JKD to learn weapons forms? So the part that's throwing me is the JKD journey that led him into HEMA, you see, and then would it still be JKD to learn weapons forms? So again, not knowing him and having that detail, this is what I would say. To a degree, Brenton, it is the JKD mindset because Bruce Lee was a hipster. Bruce Lee was a 1960s hipster. And Bruce Lee was not an anti-traditionalist, but he was a pro. He was not. I wouldn't say that Bruce Lee was anti-traditional. Because Bruce Lee had some very traditional approaches. Like if you read the rules and regulations for the Junfan Gung Fu Institute, right? I mean, even like stuff about salutations and what have you, right? If you look at having a ranking system, a colored ranking system at that, there was a period where Bruce Lee was big on uniforms and what have you. So I wouldn't say that he was an anti-traditionalist. He might have been an anti-classicalist. Anyhow, right? Anyhow, the thing about forms is that was Bruce Lee ranting against the imposition on martial arts students of, again, let's use a term that we used before, gospel, treating the kata, the forms, as gospel. They have to be done this way and this way only, or you're doing it wrong. They practice mindlessly, and then in the worst case scenario, mistaken for combat skill. Because, and I know this from personal experience, I had instructors who said, if you practice your kata, your kumite will improve. I don't think so, because I didn't see it happen. Certainly didn't happen for me. But I remember being in two different schools, being told something along the same line. In the other school, it was like, well, try to use the sequences in the kata or the sequences in the form in your sparring, right? Nah, not so much, right? So Bruce Lee's rejection of forms was against that classical approach to it. Not that they're completely worthless, This is my opinion. So if you are in HEMA and you're going to go study Shaolin forms for a specific reason, right? To improve like your understanding of movement and timing and angulation and power generation and fluidity and that type of thing, then that's a strategic choice. So you're not imprisoning yourself in like a classical style. You see? So that's a JKD mindset. Why going to Muay Thai? Not to become a Thai boxer, but to spend time in it and see what it is that they do so well. See what it is that they do that has given them this fearsome reputation in the fight world. Train in it, experience it, and then come out of it with whatever it is your particular takeaway. So you're not looking to become Shaolin, right? You're doing it to extract what is useful for or useful to your journey with HEMA. And to me, that is exactly in the spirit of Jeet Kune Do, right? So if, because I'm watching Marco Polo, right? So the Thousand Eyes, right? If learning and then Gia Sidao, the praying mantis guy. Oh my God, I love the fight scenes. So if Shaolin broadsword is going to teach you something about cutting mechanics, and that helps you with your Hema longsword, more power to you. That's what I say, right? So yeah, I think I would say you're on the right path with that. Okay. Um, Bucky says, is it reasonable to say that Bruce Lee found it difficult to get people to understand what he had to say? Well, there is the thing about, and I should know this quote by heart, right? I've disbanded all the Jeet Kune Do schools because it's it's easy for the students to mistake the program as the way and the something as the something. I don't know that particular quote. Um, so I think that with some people, Bruce Lee probably had no problem in communicating. But then with other people, yeah, it probably was a little bit frustrating because everybody's not the same. And everybody who's interested in the same thing doesn't have the same level of passion for it, doesn't even have the same level of interest. That's why, in the martial arts setting, that's why students come and go. Not everybody stays. That's because people are different. So, it's a biblical thing too about Jesus preaching and falling on the rocks and the weeds and the fertile ground and what have you. So I think it would be safe to assume. Wait, I'm going to pull a thing here from Mick Tully. Mick, look where I'm at. But you notice the color because I added pomegranate juice to it, and I added apple cider, and I added a shot of Jameson, and I added something else. What else? Oh, and what's the other thing? Oh, lemon juice, right? So that makes it infinitely better. But I bought I bought 4 bottles of it, so I'm probably only gonna do like one and a half, and then I don't know, find somebody to give the other ones to because I can't take it. I can't take it. But when I come visit you, Mick, I'll behave myself, and whatever it is that is put in front of me, I will imbibe and I will gorge myself on without question. Okay. All right. Okay. So I guess this is what you're talking. You're talking about Lovato. Lovato Senior is a top student of Richard Bustillo. That's why it's familiar, right? So Junior just took bronze and what have you. Okay. Nice, nice, nice. Okay. All right. Thanks, Mick. I will definitely look at that. Uh, Magazine Retriever says the worst example of JKD politics I've encountered is when someone says, "My JKD is the only authentic JKD." Yeah, yeah. People like that run real far away from them, right? Bob Lander says to Cesar that Joe Louis did the advanced Jeet Kune Do. Bob, Bob's always good for a laugh, right? Always good for a laugh. Um, Billy Brown says he still has the knees. It's just the rest of the body. All right, Billy, you're too much. Right. Right. Proper mechanics is a must for kicking, and that's what's missing. Yeah. Right. Okay. All right. Let me just scan through and see. Okay. Ricard saying that it's talking about the changes that Ted Wong made. Right. But to change for the sake of changing. Yeah, well, I don't know that anybody in Jeet Kune Do changed anything for the sake of changing, right? Look who's here. Close out. What's happening, Sonny boy? All right. Okay. Okay. Well, you guys can read this. This is a pretty good one from Billy. I can't read the whole thing, but yeah, Sifu Dan had to put stuff together, right? Because you do need a curriculum. Look, if you're going to go around, my seminar career is nowhere near right what Sifu Dan's has been. Okay, now I'm working to changing that so that in time to come, I'll be going around and teaching in different places and what have you. But I can tell you, there is nobody who could be as prolific a seminar instructor as Dan Inosanto and just be winging it every time that he landed somewhere and had to go teach a group. No, no. And then, even worse, imagine if you're just winging it and you have a group of people that are now going to be certified to teach by you and you don't have a structured program for them. I don't know how far that would go. So you do have to organize your stuff up to a point. Okay. The 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 JKD line that you don't want to cross is when you tell persons one, two, three, four, and five, all of you must do it the same way. You must look the same way, and your students must look the same way. Otherwise, you're all doing JKD wrong. Your Jeet Kune Do is not authentic. That's the problem right there. Right. Okay. So last one from the notes. And this is from my namesake, Mr. Melcher in Iowa, I think it is. Right. So hypothetically speaking, but this was a huge hypothetical. Hypothetically speaking, in 100, 200, or even 500 years. See, so Doug, when you said that, I was like, well, there's no way I can answer this because my brain can't wrap itself around what's Jeet Kune Do going to be doing 500 years from now, right? So Doug wanted to know, how do you see, do I think that every martial art out there would go to a JKD type art, right? And how will JKD have to evolve? And then the last part was, what's the greatest gift you've gotten from Guru Dan? So let's do the future first. Will every martial art eventually become a JKD type art? No, probably not, because there will always be a split between the traditionalists, the classicalists, and the modernists. So there will always be martial arts that prioritize um, functionality versus martial arts that might um, prioritize tradition as such. And that's just human nature. It's always going to be that way, right? We were talking about politics earlier. There's always going to be divisiveness in politics. You're never going to have opposing parties go, oh yeah, we see everything exactly eye to eye. It ain't going to happen. Even though both parties say, I'm in Washington, D.C., because I'm talking about my country. I'm in Washington, D.C. to do the bidding of my constituents. So if everybody's there to do good for the people, how come there's contention? But see, I'm not that sophisticated a thinker. So, right? So I don't think that every art would be like a JKD art. No. Um, Now, Jeet Kune Do itself, 500 years from now, I mean, I would like to think that before I depart this mortal coil, that I will have done so much that to perpetuate and promote and promulgate Jeet Kune Do, that 500 years from now, people are still talking about it. They're still training it. They don't have to be talking about me, right? But the art of Jeet Kune Do lives on. Yeah, I would. To me, that would be worth it. But Jeet Kune Do itself has to be careful, because Jeet Kune Do, if Jeet Kune Do does not follow its own advice, and obviously the art can't follow its own advice, it's the people, it's the artists, the Jeet Kune Do practitioners who have to follow the art's advice. So you you know what you're training and why you're training it. Okay, you know it's not, the future of Jeet Kune Do is not about collecting more techniques, right? It's not about collecting more arts. It's about sharpening the ability to assess, sharpening the ability to adapt, sharpening the ability to apply that which works for the individual who is facing the situation in front of him or her. That's the thing, right? Now, is there a fixed blueprint for that? No, not necessarily. But man, the glorious challenge is in coming up with that stuff. That's the glorious challenge, right? So the real Jeet Kune Do of 500 years from now, maybe it doesn't look anything like today's Jeet Kune Do because AI, because robots, right? I don't know. Okay. But as long as we all do the best job that we can to, I almost said preserve it, right? The best job that we can to promote it. Yeah, I think we'll be okay, right? Okay, so um, the greatest gift that you've received from Dan and Asano, literally, the greatest gift that I've received from Dan and Asano is a polo shirt with the embroidered JKD symbol and the embroidered name in Asano. I have it hanging in my closet there. I should have brought it out so I could show it to you guys. Right? That's the literal greatest gift that I've gotten from him. But I don't want to rip off my favorite Jeet Kune Do senior, Cass Magda. His answer to this is learning how to learn. That Inasano taught him, right? That what he learned from Inasano is how to learn. So I don't want to rip him off, but I love his answer. So I'll say instead that the greatest gift that I got from Inasano is permission, right? Permission to explore, permission to question, permission to be a perpetual student, right? Permission to evolve past what he is teaching without thinking that you're, in some shape or form, you're betraying what was taught, right? So Inasano has never just handed out technique. What he hands out, and again, this is why I'm amazed that more of the younger generation of Inasano instructors are not beating down the doors of the still available, I almost said relics, but that's not what I mean. Icons. That's what I mean, not relics, right? The icons. And by icons, I mean people who you're going to be hard pressed to find anybody who was there with Bruce Lee these days, other than Inasano. If you find somebody else of a level like Inasano, I don't think there's anybody left. So it's just him. So then the next best thing is, who are the people that were with Inasano in the vintage years, in the prime years, not vintage, in the prime years? Is there anybody out there who was with Inasano when Inasano himself was in his prime? When I don't do it, so I'm just quoting my Jeet Kune Do seniors who grew up in a different environment than I did, right? So the saying is, when Dan was on fire, okay, the younger generation of instructors should be beating a path uh, um, to these guys' doors, because Inasano started teaching full time in the early 80s. So that's 43 years, right? If you've only been around for 10 years, how much did you miss? If you've been around for 20 years, how much did you miss? If you've been around for 30 years, you still miss more than a decade. You see? So there's a lot of stuff that you missed out on. So that's what I'm saying, right? I'm not saying that what you're getting now isn't valuable. Of course it is. You're getting it from Dan and Asano, so it's valuable. But you're getting it from someone who's, I mean, he's still a specimen, don't get me wrong, still a specimen, but you're not getting everything. And you're not getting everything at the level that it's been done at before. That's all I'm saying, right? So, whether that makes me any friends or gets me some enemies or what have you, well, too bad, right? But I'm just saying that when Dan Inosanto says that your loyalty, and unfortunately for him, he thinks that everybody in the room is a decent human being who will not misinterpret what he's saying. But I know people who deliberately misinterpret what he's saying in order to advance themselves. So when he says that your loyalty is to your own knowledge, okay, as opposed to your loyalty being to, and I've heard him say it before, your instructor, I understand what he's saying. But I know that there are people out there who are like, oh, Inasano is saying, I don't even have to be, I don't have to be loyal to the guy who got me here. Okay. So, right. There are people like that. Um, for me, what Inasano shows by example is that you can honor your teachers without being imprisoned by their legacy. You see? So that's what I strive to do. Honor my teacher, but not imprisoned by his legacy. So you could be a fierce protector of of the Inasano lineage, the Inasano tradition, right? And still be a relentless seeker of the truth. You can do both. So that's the inheritance that I got. That's what I would say, right? And that's what I try to pass forward every time. Every time I teach, every time I train, or even in just having conversations like this. Okay. So that is the last one from the notes. I am going to take one last look at the panel here and see. Lee said Jack Daniels. No, it was a Jack. It was Jameson's, and it's funny. I was I found it. Where was it? It was in my weapons bag. Now, how did it get into my weapons bag? Because no, it wasn't in my weapons bag. It was in my backpack because flight attendant gave me the little thing, right, as a parting gift. And I found it just the other day in my backpack, right? So it was Jameson's, not Jack Daniels Aubrey, right? Okay. Um, Miguel says, "Why do you believe people have such a hard time understanding JKD?" Because Miguel, JKD is not. In some instances, it's not a straightforward thing. So people have a hard time. A lot of people, probably even a majority of people out there, want to be told, do it this way. They don't want to be told, okay, look, there's like 3 different ways you could do it. So what you need to do is to educate yourself about these 3 different ways, maybe even test each of the 3 different ways, right? And see which one works for you. Most people don't want that. They want you to tell them, all right. I remember Dan Kennedy he used to tell us a story about college professors who their students would be like, no, 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 no. Don't tell me to read these 6 books and come to my own conclusions. Tell me which book is the best one to read. And these are college students, people who ostensibly are going to school in order to learn how to think. So that's one of the reasons why some people, not everybody, right? Like Closeout himself, he didn't have a problem, right? In fact, when Miguel was active, he and I used to have some of the best JKD conversations, right, ever. So it's not everybody that has a hard time understanding Jeet Kune Do. It's just those people who are not naturally oriented to self cultivation, because Jeet Kune Do is a vehicle for self cultivation, for self development. So people who are, let's say, more externally oriented, right? They'll have a hard time. Doesn't mean that they can't acquire it, and some of that is dependent on the level of the instructor, right? And then some of it is like, do they have the raw stuff inside of them that can be cultivated? Okay. Um, okay, Billy, this one's too long, but I will read it myself and I will comment after the fact. Right? Okay. All right. Dell says most of Bruce Lee's original students have passed away, so we need to learn all that we can from them while they're still here. Well, okay, but wait, Dell. Most of Bruce Lee's original students have passed away. So we need to learn all that we can from them while they're still here. But again, outside of Inasano, who else is there? I think somebody told me that Patrick Strong is still around, but does still look. So I think I don't know, but I can tell you, okay, Beach Avenue, Marina Del Rey. You can go see Dan Inasano. Well, not today, not right now, because he's in Atlanta at Francis Fong's. But in terms of somebody who was literally next to Bruce Lee for a period of time, that guy's still there. So go to him. Say to him, I'm from this part of the world. Do you have anybody in this part of the world? And that you don't even have to do that. You can reach out to just about anybody from anywhere in the world because of this bloody thing that we call the internet. Now, it's not the best thing. It's not as good as being in someone's physical presence, but there's no reason for people not to reach out. That's why we have titans, because in my opinion, but I'm biased, because these two were extremely influential on me as I was coming up. That's why Ron Reagan and I produced Titans here in Miami, because Chris Kent and Cass Magda, I think, are two of the best of that Inasano generation out there in the world. There's other good ones, but these two guys, okay, were tight, real tight within Asano. So I think that they're good people to bounce questions off to get training under and that type of thing. But we'll be talking about Titans later in the year, right? Okay, all right. So listen, that's it for me today. Keep these things in mind. Okay, Jeet Kune Do, never about arriving at some final destination. It's about keeping yourself in motion, right? In your training, in your thinking, in your living. So even if it's like Doug asked about 500 years from now, right? It survives not because we preserved it in a museum, but because we preserved the freedom to keep it alive, right? So that's my advice. Okay. I'm just going to end it there. Okay. So that's it. Feel free, share, like, comment, and I'll go through. What time is it? 7:45. I'll go through. Yeah, maybe I can do some of it this evening. And if I need to comment on anything, I will do it. So follow me on Twitter at Dwight Woods and on Instagram at Dwight D Woods, at paypal.me/unifiedma Miami, paypal.me/unifiedma Miami. The Jeet Kune Do Journey Volume 1 is available. paypal.me/unifiedma Miami. If you are not yet, hang on, let me get rid of this. If you've not yet gone over to JKD Drills, please do so. Like the page, become a follower over there, and then when it's up and running, you'll be among the first to be informed. If you are over on the YouTube, I think I just saw something here. Who was it? I just saw something, but I missed it now. Lester, the Skeptic Tank, just became a member. So thank you very much for that, Lester. If you're on the YouTube, you can just click the join link, and you can become a paid subscriber to the channel. And the little bit of revenue that we get from that does help out to when we need to get. See, we used to have these headsets. Now we have this headset, right? Stuff like that. Okay. And that is it for all the self promotion stuff, right? Okay. So we are on the road next Friday, heading to Reseda for Cass Magda's All Knife All Weekend seminar. So probably not going to produce something next week, but I live in hope, right? Okay, so until next time, this is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Do Rebel, signing off. You guys have a great weekend wherever you are, and we will talk soon. Take care now.